Okay, so I've been watching a lot of the videos responding to Iskar Jirak's challenge to try and summarize Malazan, and I thought I'd get my hat in the ring here because a lot of these videos are 8, 12, 20 minutes long, which I feel like sort of is not in the spirit of what the challenge is supposed to be. I mean, as far as I understand it, the challenge is, can you summarize Malazan in a concise and simple way? The same way that we might summarize something like Lord of the Rings by saying, someone asks you, what's Lord of the Rings about? And we would probably all say, well, Lord of the Rings is about trying to destroy an evil ring. There's a bad guy, he made a bad ring, and we're going to have an unexpected hero who's going to go on a big, long journey to try and destroy it. That's what Lord of the Rings is about. That's a really simple explanation. It ignores lots of the side things about Lord of the Rings. You don't get into any of, it's no indication of tons of the nuance of that story, but we're just boiling it down to this one idea. There's a bad ring and we're trying to destroy it. So how do we do the same thing for Malazan? And this is, I think, what's so hard for so many readers is that when you say, okay, if Lord of the Rings is about destroying a bad ring, what's Malazan about? And we can all read all 10 books and have read 3.3 million words, and instantly we're kind of like, well, Malazan's about, it's not a clear answer the same way that it is for Lord of the Rings. So, but okay, at the risk of being reductive, I want to try and do this as simply as possible to try and answer Iskar Jirak's challenge the way that I believe that the challenge was intended. So I think what's so hard about this is the fact that Malazan starts as something that I think is pretty easily summarizable and ends as something that I think is pretty easily summarizable, but those two things are very different. And I think the transition from one to the other happens gradually over the course of the series to the point that we don't really even necessarily realize it's happened unless you stop and kind of look back and think about it. So let's summarize this in two parts. We're not going to be, I don't think we're going to be able to do there's a big bad ring and we're going to destroy it summary, but maybe we can summarize it like this. The Malazan Book of the Fallen begins as a story about the Malazan Empire. It's an empire that is constantly expanding, and consequently it's a story of imperialism, it's a story of colonialism, it's a story of assimilation, and probably more importantly than the empire itself, it's a story about an elite unit within the empire's military, and that unit having its own identity independent of the empire itself, and that unit's struggles and challenges and all that good stuff. That's where the story starts. Okay. But where does the story end? Well, Malazan becomes a story. If the first part was very militaristic, by the end of the story, it's much more a philosophical story. It's a story about a search for meaning, and it's a story about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. And it's still about a military, it's still about an elite unit, albeit a different elite unit within that military. But that has kind of taken a sideline to some of these more philosophical ideas. So, is that the equivalent of the Lord of the Rings is about a bad ring that we're trying to destroy? No. This is still a lot of words to try and explain this story. But, I think if we were going to try and summarize Malazan in the same way as we can summarize Lord of the Rings, the truth is it's a spoiler. You can't, if someone asks you, hey man, I know you really love Malazan, what's it about? You can't give the answer of, oh, we're going to go try and destroy this ring. You can't give that equivalent because you're just going to spoil the back half of the series for them. So let's say if you haven't read Malazan, turn the video off, stop watching, because now I'll do the spoiler summary. Because the truth is, if we're going to go ahead and just say, okay, what's Malazan about? If Lord of the Rings is about destroying a ring, Malazan's about freeing a god. Right? Isn't it? That's at the end of the day, that's the entire purpose of every major beat of the story in terms of the big lifeblood that runs through the entire series. Malazan is about trying to free a tortured, miserable god who has done nothing but spread his misery throughout the world. And Malazan focuses on this journey to say, we're going to do the right thing, we're going to do the compassionate thing, we're going to do the unthinkably impossible thing, and we're going to free this god from its prison and get it back to where it came from, and in so doing, we're going to save the world and save magic and all that kind of stuff. that's as simple as it gets, I think, from Malazan. And I think that's more in line with what Iskar Jirak was trying to pose to us as his loyal viewers. And again, very simple, very reductionist. I'm ignoring so much. I mean, I might be ignoring 80% of the story by just putting it down in those words. But that's it. That's our summary. So there's my attempt at it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you everyone who makes Malazan content on YouTube. I love you guys. Thank you, Iskar. And hope to hear back from you soon.